This piece is called Falling Hive, and it's the third in the Hive series, which the first one was Tumor Hive, the second was Temple Hive, and this one, and I use the term hive, I call them all hives because they're about a collective space, about bringing people together into sort of like I think of it as an intimate space. And Falling Hive came from a dream that I had when I was a child, a reoccurring dream, where I was walking through an icy wasteland, and I would come across a big pit. And there was 2 ways down the pit, and every time I would try to climb down, because as is the logic of dreams, you have to climb down the icy pit wasteland, and I would always fall. And I remember that, there was like this sort of, kind of motion that would happen, and color, and blue, and white, and when I decided to make a third hive, I chose blue. The first one, Tumor Hive, was red and pink, and the second Temple Hive was yellow and white. And so part of it was about completing this trilogy of the primary colors, which was something that, is sort of ingrained in you all through your sort of life as a learning artist, like this trio. And I wanted to complete that trio, and I knew it would be blue, and I was looking for what would be the essence of blue to me. And I looked at a lot of sort of symbology, history, and kind of thought of a lot of different things that blue might mean to me. But that dream kind of summed up of what sort of the essence of blue. And then the shape, they're all, I think of them as portable sculptures, and the first 2 were designed after more a wigwam structure, a tent wigwam. And then this one is based on nomadic tents, which were sort of the poles, kind of more of a familiar tent structure, I think. So it's kind of bringing that experience, sharing that experience with an audience, and people can go in, so sometimes people are sort of hesitant, and some people have been going in, but feel free, because it really, it completes the experience to go in and to look up, and it's not completely, but it's a very different feel on the inside than on the outside. And yes, I get asked a lot if I sewed it myself. Yes, I did. And if anybody has any questions.
Was it hard to get the curves,
Oh, well, let me explain a little bit more. I should explain a little more of that. You see all the 3D stuff on the wall, all the 2D stuff on the wall were how I developed the idea with the structure and the shape of the base and the poles. So those all developed the basic idea of what the shape would be, the curves, and but to work it out, to really get the idea of how the piece is going to look and work, I use models. I use these maquettes. And you can see a maquette of the piece in the front. And once I built the maquette, it was originally designed as sort of an enclosed structure, more like a circus tent. But once I built the maquette, it always changes the piece a lot. And I dropped the sides, which I think now it has this great flow, and it's more becomes like waves and clouds, and it's not so much about an enclosure, but about just sort of, looking up, and the becomes like the outside of it becomes more, I think, dynamic. And so once I was done with the model, which was completely just sort of taken from the drawings, worked up on the, I set up the poles, and I just create the model it's all sort of off the cuff, literally using these tiny sort of strings to work it all out. And then I took the model and I created a paper pattern from it, and that was basically scanned and by a tech place, and they exploded it 25% or something like that. And so it's exactly, the patterns are exactly the model. Yeah.
Were you experimenting with, notice on the model you have different types of fabric, did you just select your favorite one for the big one?
towards the end, I was still figuring out the surface. I kind of played around with a lot of different ideas with the surface. Kind of ran through a lot of things, like on the drawings you can see some of them are solid, some of them have more of like a texture. And so when I did the model, I think I was still sort of finalizing the surface design. And so I just went and bought different kinds of patterns and textures to kind of play with and see how they worked with the different shapes and from the different angles. And I think around the same time is when I made the stripey drawing, which to me was the moment that I sort of hit on that this was how I wanted it to look, because the pit drawing, there's a small sort of watercolor that's right in this corner called the pit, and I made that actually last year. I made it before I made the piece, and it was kind of when I went back and looked at it that I had that aha moment, like this is the texture, this is the palette, these are the colors. And then the way I built it, I used to have all these sort of markings to test stuff on the model, but I took it off because it looks much nicer without it. But each pattern segment sort of built up section by section so that like each movement was unique, you know, and like each thing is sort of, like I use randomness a lot to my benefit, which is great when you're working with all these multiple materials and colors. You can do that.
Do dreams influence a lot of your work, or just this piece?
That was this piece. This is the first time. The first hive that I made was called Tumor Hive. It was based on just sort of this health crisis, and I had never really done anything directly biographical since art school, when you do a lot of that stuff. And then the second hive, Temple Hive, was more based on sort of a portable spiritual space. And so I'd like to change things up every time. So I had never done anything about a dream before, but I knew that I wanted to, you know, that it would be something. But I do try to make them all personal, that they're about a personal experience and sort of abstracting it.
Did you study Christo and his orange fence?
Well,
Were you inspired by Christo?
I would say that, you know, like, every young artist in art school, you see Christo and it kind of blows your mind. You're like, this is my fantasy. I want to make art this big and this huge. But I'd say indirectly, I was more inspired by the quilts of G's Bend, which are these incredible folk art quilts, which is that's kind of where I got the idea of like using the strip pattern. It's like a very sort of, it's a very common pattern in the sense that, you know, you can make, you know, like a whole quilt out of scraps, you know, using this method. And so that I'd say G's Bend, and then also, nomadic tents, really. I mean, I love Christo as much as anybody, but I don't think he wouldn't make me like the top of the list, inspiration-wise.
Well, it seems like in your dream and kind of in your models and your drawings, a lot of it is kind of looking down on this piece, and also sort of like cold, icy, almost scary sort of feeling. And this is sort of looking up and really kind of a welcoming, safe tent sort of atmosphere. Is that sort of your way of kind of making it like, and taking power over it? Or?
Yeah. Well, that's what all the pieces are about, like sort of kind of empowering this, taking sort of a semi-negative experience, like Tumor Hive, like that was a pretty negative experience. I was like sick and weak, and when I was post-surgery, I was like, well, I'm going to take back my health and my life, and I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to do something big. And that was, and Temple Hive, that was a little bit, that's kind of a convoluted story, but it was basically I was sort of making this like space based on sort of like this. When I was a kid, I used to like hide behind the dining room curtains, and like I had two older brothers, and they were evil, so like I would hide a lot, and so I was kind of creating this space, and you know I took that experience and like made it, you know, sort of big, and so yeah, I like to take these things that are sort of, you know, it's kind of negative and turn it into something really positive and beautiful to me. I hope beautiful to other people.
It reminds me of Circus Soleil. Like you're going to go to the circus.
I love well, the circus tents, that kind of inspired the whole idea of like a portable environment. Like, cause I think I love that, I don't know if it's just, like I moved a lot when I was a kid and I just sort of like that idea of like traveling, like to me that was a positive thing and I don't know. So circus to me implies